As we've discussed previously, public speaking is a form of power, and with great power comes great responsibility. Public speakers often have to deal with matters of ethics in the creation of their speeches. They have to ask whether it's ever appropriate to lie to an audience. Is it okay for us to use evidence that supports our claim even if we're not 100% certain that it's true? There's all sorts of questions that come up when we are developing a speech. So it's important for us to look at the way that ethics interplays and intertwines with public speaking. So let's talk first about ethics today. Our moral principles often govern our behavior as people. We decide what's right and wrong, just and unjust, fair and unfair, and we let that decide how we're going to behave in society. The same is true of public speaking. So we have to ask the question, what is it that makes a speech ethical? And researchers have come up with this idea of the ethics pyramid, and it has the speaker's intent in mind, the speaker's means, as well as the speaker's ends. So first with the speaker's intent. We know that the speaker has to begin with ethical intentions. For example, if we agree that honesty is ethical, it follows that ethical speakers will tell the truth. So we have to ask ourselves whether the speaker's idea, whether the speaker's message is right or wrong, if it's just or unjust, etc., and apply those ethical principles to determine whether or not the speaker's intent is ethical. We also have to ask whether the speaker's means are ethical. The means are the tools or behaviors that we employ to achieve a desired outcome. So it's the path that we take in order to get to a specific outcome. And these are the range of possible behavior choices that we have. So we have to ask whether the choices that we make to achieving our ends are ethical as well. This is where using evidence that supports our argument but isn't necessarily 100% correct would play in. We have to decide whether we use that specific evidence, whether we use those means in order to achieve our ends. And the ends are the outcomes that we desire. So, for example, we might be trying to persuade our audience to make a financial contribution, and we have to weigh whether them making that financial contribution is right or wrong. And we have to make sure that we are ethical throughout this idea of the pyramid, through the intent, the means, as well as the ends, in order to be a truly ethical speech. One of the ways that we determine whether something is ethical or not is via the general consensus. So we look at society as a whole and determine whether or not we all think that this particular action is right or wrong or just or unjust, etc. And we come to the conclusion of whether or not it's ethical. And finally, another way that we can determine whether or not something is ethical is to ask ourselves as speakers, what if the situation was reversed? What if we were the ones who were in the audience being persuaded by a speaker to donate money somewhere? Would we feel uncomfortable donating money to a particular cause? If so, we might want to question the ethics of our ends, because if we as audience members would feel uncomfortable, then we as speakers should also feel uncomfortable. So that's how we can begin to look at ethics as a whole within public speaking.